Okay, so what I'm going to do now is, well, first of all, one thing that I noticed is I feel like I have not enough of like the thin lines and too much of like the really large lines, because I just like it when it's a little bit more noisy. So that's quite easy. All I need to do is just pretty much go in my tile generator, and I can choose or to change the Y amount, or I can probably simply change like the scale over here. Here, see, and then we can get like more or less. Let's see what looks better. I always like to just play around with it. I think I'm gonna change the Y amount a bit and then make it also a little bit bigger. Yeah, I think something like that should work. So we got like some really intense wood here and there. And what you can also do, if you don't really like the seed, you can always just go in here, change the seed around until you got something that you like. Because like one that I don't like is I don't like this specific one over here for some reason. And I'm quite picky about that kind of stuff, so I can just go in here and maybe also like play around with my global offset to make like some small changes. But I think in general, yeah, that should be fine. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go ahead and this gradient dynamic, I'm going to maybe add a few more lines in my tile generator. I'm surprised that this one does not have a lot. Here, see? That's quite surprising. I just want to check out. So this one is 64 and this one is now also. So if I make this one like 40 and this one from 64 maybe like 80. 80 feels a bit too noisy. Let's try 70. And let's have a look when it gets over here. Yeah, you know what? That should be fine. Like, let's first of all go ahead and just focus on like now the knots, which, where's my reference? Oh god, my reference is really large for some reason. Give me 1 second. It's because I'm working in different resolutions. It sometimes is buggy. Yeah, let's go ahead and just like add a few of these knots over here, because they will also affect the flow of our gradients, and then we can take it from there. Because even here you can also see like quite large gradient spots. So it's up to us to decide like later on how we are going to balance it out. For those knots, like, because they can be pretty random, it's gonna be not too difficult to create them. However, I am going to like go a little bit off script again. So let's start with like a simple tile generator, and let's go over here. And I do like to work organized, so I like to select all of my grain nodes, add a frame, and just call this like main grains over here. And let's go in our tile generator. Let's set the pattern. I want the pattern to just be like a simple harsh round square over here. Amount, I feel like having probably like 6 is fine. Then what I like to do is I like to do like a scale random over here, and just make the general scale also like quite a bit lower. So these are just going to be like nice small knots here and there. And then I can just go ahead and go for offset random, position random over here. See, just randomize it all. Rotation random doesn't really matter. And then what I like to do is I like to go ahead and also in my random mask over here, if you go all the way down, we can like lower or higher the amount. So I can just like, here, see, lower it a little bit. Okay, so from these, what we need to do is we need to generate a few different type of masks. So the first one is like the actual knots that we will add on top. And for that, what I'm going to do is I grab this one. And first of all, I'm just wanting to like break up the shape because it's way too perfect. So let's go ahead and go for like a, let's try a multi-direction warp grayscale. And maybe I can just reuse my clouds 2 over here. And yeah, let's go ahead and just do that. Now, at this point, I can actually show you a new node if you want. However, I'm not sure if that node works this way. So if you go ahead and press space and type in portal, oh wait, yeah, portal, you will get a dot node. This is a brand new feature in Substance Designer. 1 second, I completely forgot welcome screen. I forgot which one it is, so I will need to double check just to make sure that everyone knows. It is Substance Designer number... Come on. They make it so difficult just to see it. Well, it's a Substance Designer version that has been released. Ah yeah, here. Version 13.0.0. So just make sure, if you have a lower version than this, you will not have this node. Basically what the portal node allows us to do is it allows us to like input or just input like anything. And then I can go over here and I can give it a name. clouds_2_basic. And now the cool thing is that I can now recall this somewhere else. So what I can do is, instead of like needing to click and drag this clouds all the way over here, this is a new feature where I can create a portal here. So I can go up here, space, portal, and create a dot node. And then I can go into the input portal and I can select clouds2basic and plug it in. And then what it will do is it will basically read this node over here. This will make our workflows so much cleaner. I really, really love this. Like, I'm so happy that they added this. So we are also going to make use of this feature just to organize things. Now, having that done, I'm going to set the mode to minimum because I want to go ahead and only like cut away from the white. And then with 4 directions, you can go over here and play with your intensity to just go ahead and give it, like, as you can see over here, a bunch of slightly different looking knots, which is looking quite good. Awesome. Okay, so now what we need to do is, let's see, we need like 2 of them. We need a edge detect over here because I need to kind of like detect the edges. So let's say the edge roundness lower. Here we go. I just need to kind of like have a detection around the edges. This is later on needed for like to push our knots inside of the wood a little bit. And also for the colors. It will also work with colors because as you can see over here, around all of these wood knots, you often have like this round edge around it. So that's that one. Now what I need is, I'm just gonna give it like a blur high quality grayscale. Just give it like a tiny blur just to make it a little bit nicer. And I'm going to use a vector warp. So if I go ahead and add a vector warp grayscale. Now in the vector map, I'm most likely going to, I just need to make sure that this one works. I need something to actually warp around and I'm just gonna probably like use some lines for now. Basically what we're going to do is we are going to rotate these lines around our inside of these knots over here to basically mimic the effect of having like grains. Let's do wire mount by resolution. And the direction shouldn't really matter too much. I should be able to input this. Add a normal node and just like OpenGL and just plug in the norm map over here. And then what I need to do is, okay, so it only notices that node. That is a bit tricky. Let's say instead of a norm map, let's go ahead and grab a, let's try like a flood fill. So I'm just going to try using a position map. A flood fill basically converts any isolated shape into like a position. And using that, if we go ahead and just play around with the intensity, here we go. We can get like something quite similar. It is going to be so small and subtle. I don't need it to be like really perfect, to be honest, because it's just not really needed. You will never get the resolution for that. So let's see. So something like this might work. I'm just gonna see what it looks like if I plug in this one over here. I guess with this one we need like a bigger intensity. This one does feel a bit better, to be honest. So let's just go ahead. Like you can definitely see like there's a difference. Let's leave this one out, the anisotropic noise. But for now, let's just go ahead and use this one. And I'm not going to use those dot nodes for like really small function like this. The reason I wanted to use the dots node on a clouds 2 is because we can reuse it often. So we got this one. Now, basically, what we're going to do is we have a blend, and we are going to blend our edge And let's set this to like subtract. Yeah, I'm probably going to like leave it like this. And then a histogram range maybe. To like balance things out a little bit. So this is like number one. What you would do is if we go ahead and like add a normal node and just have like a look how this looks. You can see that over here, like I would need to probably like set my edge detect quite a bit lower. God, looks like I cannot go lower than this. When you cannot go lower than this, there's two ways that we can do. So there is a node which is called fine edge detect. However, this node is probably been taken offline already by now because it's quite an old one. But what I can do is I can just import it and see if it works, and if it does work, then I will give you guys this node. Fine edge detect allows us here to go much smaller with our edge detect. I've placed this node in your textures and wood folder, so you guys can also use it. So another way would be like to grab a blur and then to like add another histogram scan behind it, which basically allows you to see, to like kind of like also balance with it. But it's not always as accurate as the fine edge detect node. So we got this node. I don't think I need to blur it because it's so thin now. So let's see. So we go like around it. And that's looking pretty decent over here. Let's have a look at my histogram scan. Yeah, the position is fine. And here we can like control the intensity. Okay, awesome. So what we can basically do is with this one. And I often like to just add this after we have our normal map. You would have your normal map here, and if we just go ahead and combine those, it would basically be a normal map. Let's do a... Yeah, let's do... I don't know if we need to combine or blend. Let's do combine. Basically what I'm thinking about is, of course, when we have these nodes, we need to cut away the stuff behind it. So basically what you need to do is you need to blend your normal map with something called a normal color over here, which is just like a plain normal color. And for the mask, you guessed it, you want to just use the knots over here. And it looks like that I'm just going to swap these two around. There we go, see? So now we have our knots. However, I guess that the edge detect needs to be added on top. So let me just add another blend. And blend the knots along with the edge detect over here. Set this to add. Oh, does that make a difference? Yes or no? Yeah, that does make a difference. Awesome. Okay, so basically end up with just the knots and like the stuff around it. And then when you blend these two together, along with a high quality, you can see that now we have our knots in our wood. And what we would want to do is we would want to probably make this a lot less strong. But yeah, what you can see now is that you can see through this. So it's up to you to decide if you want to do this or you want to go ahead for a normal blend. And with the normal blend, you can basically blend between two normal maps like this using a mask, which will make sure that you just cut out the knots themselves. But okay, so we can decide on this, but first of all, what we need to do is we need to warp all of these areas around our knots. Now this is quite easy. So we have over here our multi-directional warp grayscale and all that kind of stuff. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and add a blur high quality grayscale to this one. And yes, I'm going to make it quite intense, something like this. And then I'm going to add an auto levels behind it just to push it back up. And I think that should work if I just go ahead and blur it a bit more over here. Now the next thing that I'm going to do is, let's see, let's do this one after our directional blur probably. We can add something that's called a non-uniform blur, non-uniform directional warp grayscale. It's quite a big one. And what I can do with this one is I can go ahead and plug in the input and the warp angle, my directional blur. And then in the intensity, I can plug in that blurry noise. What this should do is it should warp its own texture around our blur. You can see it happening a little bit. And then if we just play around with our intensity, you can see that it's starting to warp basically itself around whatever we blurred in. That's why we want to have the warp angle, the same stuff. Which means that over here, you can see that now, and if I go a little bit later, you can see that it has warped around of our knots. If I now go ahead and play around with the intensity, to not make it too intense, you can imagine that now, at this point, because everything warps around it, these knots over here make a little bit more sense to have them over here. I'm also liking the normal blend more, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete the other nodes. And let's just nicely organize this. So we got this one. I like this more, yes, but what I don't like is that it still feels like the knots are not really a part of anything else. I'm going to maybe make my intensity a little bit stronger over here. So just warp it around. And I want to go ahead and make the fine edge detect. Let's add a quick blur high quality grayscale. It's quite like a low level, which will hopefully soften out. Yes, here it will soften out those normals like a little bit. 0.05. Let's do 7 maybe. Maybe 6. 0.06 over here. And then in general, I need to just check later on in Mom's toolbag to see if this is looking like the way that I want it to look. But okay, so we now have like a little bit of these knots over here. What you can do is you can also now at this point maybe add some fading to it. Just to make it a little bit more visually interesting. And we can probably do that. Now we probably want to do that over here. So let's see, so we have these knots, and if I go ahead and just add a directional blur, set the blur up to 90 degrees, and use this to kind of like create maybe like a fading effect. I can blend my knots along with like the fading effect and see if that maybe like creates a slightly more interesting effect. It does sort of work, but not completely the way that I want it to. Probably what I want to do is I have my directional blur. I probably want to go ahead and add a auto levels to it to push it up. Well, that didn't do much. Well, actually it did a little bit. And then I like to add a blend, and I'm just going to blend this with our wood grain that we've used before. Maybe like a multiply. There we go, just to like break it up. And now that will create some type of fading. I guess maybe adding a histogram scan behind it just to like have more control and pushing it out and in and all that kind of stuff. That will add a little bit of breakup and fading. It's really subtle, but it can definitely work. So let's say something like this. Now let's have a look around. So we got our noise like we have over here. So that's looking pretty good. We might need to still do some balancing. And we got our noise over here. I would say that the next thing that we want to do is we probably want to go ahead and add a few grains that are like these really like more deeper cuts inside of our wood. And after that, I think we can start just already like focusing on the color, because with wood, like you really want to go back and forth sometimes quite a bit just to make sure that it's fine. I can go ahead and add a frame here and call this knots. So let's see, so we have our wood, knots and stuff going around it. I also feel like actually over here in this non-uniform blur, we have our outer levels. I feel like adding a directional blur in here on the 90-degree angle to make this non-uniform blur like pushed out a little bit more. And if I then just go ahead and play around with the intensity here, I can like make it go like a little bit more in like a directional angle. It is subtle, but once again, sometimes subtlety is key. Over here, okay. And yeah, I'm not yet sure about like non-map. I don't feel like it's completely in the right space. I feel like, but that's something that we can of course like have a look at later on. So yeah, the last one that I'm going to do is I'm just gonna add some more deeper grains along these routes, and we'll take it from there. So for the deeper grains, we probably first want to create a noise and then we want to warp it around it. I can remember we having like a noise here. I think, what was it, grunge map 05? No, that's not the one. Funny enough, you also have this one, which kind of like feels like something that is wood, but it's not the same. But I'm just going to like play around with it a little bit, just see if it does anything. Nah, it doesn't. Okay, so let's have a think, because I want to go ahead and warp it around this one. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm going to probably grab, let's try to maybe like grab a tile generator over here. And then if I go in, let's see, let's set the Y amount a bit lower. For the pattern, I'm just gonna go for like square. And I'm going to basically like give this an interstice X that is really, really thin. And also like a random to give it like some random thickness. Some scale random, offset random, and then the Y and the X offset is gonna just be like this. I'm also going to actually, in the interstice Y, I'm going to also give it like some randomness. And I feel like over here I also want to go ahead and just tone down the randomness of like the thickness, like that. Let's have a look. Some slight rotation maybe. Some luminance random. And then if I add a multi-directional warp grayscale, maybe what I can do is if I go just to noises. Actually, let's go ahead and add a portal. And add a clouds to basic to this one also. Mode minimum. And if I just go ahead and set this like really high, it unfortunately breaks everything a bit too much. I guess if I do a mode that's like one or maybe like two directions. No, as soon as I do one direction, it does break too much. That is a little bit unfortunate that it does that. Like over here, like it does create some cracks. Oh yeah, wait, here, there we go. So this actually might work. If I set the Y amount in the tile generator a bit higher and the X amount and the Y amount a bit lower. And then try and play around a bit more with like my intensity to create like these random looking cracks. If I then probably start warping them already around it, and I wonder if I can just use the non-uniform blur, but I would want to then warp it using the intensity and then do something like this. It is not warping correctly. So instead what I can do is I can go ahead and I can literally use like a classical warp and maybe use that one. Oof, it has quite a bit of trouble warping using this specific texture over here. Let's instead try to maybe, let's again grab the non-uniform directional warp, and then if we just have this warp over here and probably like blur it a bit. So this is after we have already done all of the warping. Then it should pick up on the shapes a little bit better. So let's do like quite a heavy blur, maybe like 0.7. And use that as intensity and then plug in my warp. like I said, so this is just literally just trying stuff out. It's just that's super natural. So now you can see over here, like it is warping around our shapes, but it's way too intense. But if we go ahead and set like the, let's set the max warp angle input multiplier down. And now let's try here. So now if I just carefully like warp it around a little bit, that should sort of do the trick. If I then add a slope blur grayscale maybe, and grab again like the clouds 2 that I've used before, set the samples all the way up, mode to minimum and intensity down, I should be able to kind of like break things up a little bit. And then by the time that it actually gets added to the wood, so we do have like some of these really more thicker cuts, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but let's just see how this looks. So we have our histogram range over here. Now what I can do is I can go ahead and add a blend behind that. And we have this one. I'm going to go in my title generator. And I'm just gonna like play around with my seed until I get one that hopefully doesn't have like these really thick flat areas. There we go. Sometimes it's just about luck more. So, okay, so we got like these little bits of warps. We blend them. Probably also want to like fade them in and out near the end. The way that I can do that is I can probably grab... it's probably easier if I do it before I do anything else. I can go ahead and add a histogram. And I can do this easier. I can do this more optimized. Let's go ahead and turn off the luminance redden. Add a flood fill. And then in our flood fill we can go ahead and add a flood fill to random grayscale. So that will bring back our luminance random over here. Let's double check if that still looks correct. Yeah, still looks correct. But now what I can do is I can also add a flood fill to gradient. Plug this one in. And that will give us like some angle variations to fade things out. I will see if this looks good. So if we go, let's see, if we just grab this, blend the flood fill to gradient, to random gradient, and just do like a multiply over here. Let's see if that like breaks things up a bit more. Yeah, that looks nice. Another thing that you can do is you could go into your tile generator and instead you can input maybe like something like a, say one of those gradients over here. And then use like a pattern input image. And then you can see that it also fades in and out like that. However, if we do that, so that might actually work better, funny enough in this case. This one is more randomized, but what we can do is, so we have our flood fill. Then what we need to do is we need to add a levels, because flood fills do not read gradients. So we want to add the levels to kind of push up our gradients again. Flood fill it. Yeah, let's get rid of this blend. And then again push it down. However, the annoying thing with the random gradient is that it loses all of these details. So we would then need to like blend it again using the tile generator. So it's a bit of like back and forth, and then if we multiply it, there we go. A bit of back and forth, but in the end, we have some pretty nice warping like lines that we can work with. Now if we go into that blend, where we go into our histogram range, if we just go ahead and go to subtract. And let's have a look at our wood while doing this. Oops, wood. We can go in here. I like it, but I don't like those really thick ones. If we just go ahead, I like the thin ones. So maybe we just need to minimize the the random factor over here. Let's see, how does that look? Yeah, you see that's like a little bit thinner. And it cuts through a little bit better again. I think for now, because this is something that happens more inside of the actual base color, I think for now that looks pretty good. So we got this one. Now what I will do is I will end this chapter by just previewing our wood norm maps and stuff like that. We are going to just go ahead and in our output nodes, delete everything. And here we have our wood. We can just go ahead and plug it into our normal. I on purpose kept this quite strong, but now I'm just going to tone this down to like 0.7. And then I also need to tone down my knots based upon that to 0.1. And here we have like a very subtle but very important base wood. We can get rid of metallic. And we can get rid of the height because we don't need it right now. You can temporarily add a RTAO, which is a ray trace ambient occlusion node. And for this node we can plug in this one over here. Actually our samples don't need to be that high. We can go quite low with our samples, let's say around 30. And I'm just going to set the spread angle, maximum distance lower. And the height scale quite a bit lower. There we go. It's a really strong AO, but it's just for previewing purposes right now. So having this, I can go ahead and save. And now, when I want to preview this inside of Marmoset, all I have to do is, first of all, I have to export it. So we can just go ahead and in here, in this folder, we can probably just export it in here. You want to go ahead and go to your master wood, right click and export outputs as bitmap. Select the folder that you want to export it to. And I personally like to always export as a Targa file or TGA file, unless it's a very detailed height map. Then I prefer PNG. And this is quite important. Turn on automatic exports when outputs change. This allows us to make a change in our graph and automatically it will export so that we can preview it inside of Marmoset. I'm gonna press export over here. And now what I want to do is I want to open up Marmoset Toolbag 4, which is just my preview choice for materials and also for assets. So what I have over here for you is I have a preview scene. I call it the texture preview scene in your textures folder. You guys can have this scene completely for free. So I did a lot of experimenting to get the best looking scene for like all of your materials to work. If you want to know how I created this scene, you can simply go to my YouTube channel, just like fast track tutorials. And in here you can just go ahead and look for creating high quality material renders using Marmoset Toolbag 4. Or you can just type it into YouTube. And then you will be able to just find this a tutorial on how to set up scenes like this. This will just save me a little bit of time because I just want to quickly preview it. I'm gonna press the plus sign and go for wood_01. And in here I'm going to simply in our norm map, I'm going to drag in the normal that we exported, which is the TGA file. And then in our occlusion map, if we go for occlusion, we can drag in our occlusion and drag this on here. The occlusion I'm going to make like a little bit lower. So let's say 0.5 for example. And another thing that I like to do is in my texture, I always like to tile this by 2 or 3 times. Especially when it is wood. And in this case I'm going to lower down probably my color a little bit. So now we can kind of like see how that the wood is behaving and everything like that. So in general, like I quite like the grains and I quite like the knots. I definitely noticed that we need some color in order to properly preview this. And I feel like that my norm map can be a little bit stronger than this. So I can go in my norm map and maybe do like 0.1. But you want to make the wood quite subtle because it is like a slightly sanded wood. So it's not like really rough or bare wood or something like that. So this is more like just like a subtle effect. And now in the next chapter what we will do is we will get started by working on a base color and the roughness. And after that's done, we are just going to go back and forth a lot, improving our wood until we get exactly what we want. But for now, here you can see that it's automatically updated. For now, we have already like a really solid base. So let's go ahead and continue on to the next chapter.